Chapter 1. The Fairy Tale Wedding. The bells chimed softly as the late afternoon sun bathed the outdoor venue in golden light. Elena stood under the ivy-wrapped archway, her white dress cascading around her like a cloud. Her hands trembled, clutching the bouquet of fresh peonies, but it wasn't nerves. It was disbelief. She couldn't stop smiling. This wasn't just her wedding day. It was her dream finally coming true. Ryan Davenport, the boy she had spent her teenage years secretly pining for, was now her husband. She glanced at him, his dark hair neatly combed, his sharp suit fitted to perfection. He looked every bit the charming prince she had imagined, and for a moment she thought she caught him smiling warmly at her. "You're beautiful," Ryan whispered when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. The words sent a shiver down her spine, and her chest swelled with joy as their lips met in a gentle, perfect kiss. The applause of family and friends faded into the background. This was her fairy tale. The reception was just as magical. String lights twinkled above the garden as Elena danced with Ryan beneath the stars. Her sister, Lila, grabbed her for an impromptu spin, giggling as they twirled in a circle. "You did it," Lila said breathlessly, pulling Elena into a hug. "You married the guy you used to doodle hearts around in your notebook. How does it feel?" "Like a dream," Elena admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes I wonder if I even deserve this. He's perfect." Lila arched an eyebrow but said nothing. Elena brushed it off as her sister's typical overprotectiveness. Across the garden, Ryan was speaking to one of the guests, an older man Elena vaguely recognized as an old family friend of his. Ryan's smile was polite but tight, his posture stiff. "Who's that?" Elena asked Lila. Lila shrugged. "I think his name's Greg. He used to work with Ryan's dad, I think. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Go enjoy your perfect night." Later that evening, after the speeches, the toasts, and the cake cutting, Elena slipped away to take a breath. She leaned against the railing of the terrace, looking out at the softly lit garden. "Cold feet already?" Ryan's voice startled her. She turned to see him standing there, his hands tucked into his pockets. His smile was crooked, playful. "Not even close," Elena said. She reached for him, lacing her fingers through his. "I still can't believe you chose me." Ryan's smile faltered, just for a split second. It was so quick that Elena might have missed it if she hadn't been staring at him. "Why wouldn't I?" he asked, his tone light. Before she could respond, someone called for them to come back inside. Ryan kissed her temple and led her back to the party, but that fleeting moment of hesitation stayed with Elena, like a tiny thorn pricking the back of her mind. That night, as they settled into their honeymoon suite, Elena felt like she was glowing from the inside out. The room was stunning. A canopy bed, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, and candles flickering on every surface. As she unpacked, something caught her eye, a small, leather-bound book tucked into the side of Ryan's suitcase. It looked worn, the edges frayed, as though it had been opened and closed 1,000 times. "Is this a journal?" she asked, holding it up with a playful smile. Ryan glanced over from where he was unbuttoning his shirt. His expression froze. "Just some old notes," he said quickly, crossing the room and taking it from her hands. His tone was casual, but there was a sharpness in his eyes. Elena frowned. "I didn't mean to snoop." "It's nothing," he interrupted, placing the book back into his bag and zipping it shut. "Let's not waste time talking about something so boring." He kissed her, and for a while she forgot about the diary. But later, as Ryan drifted off to sleep beside her, Elena couldn't shake the memory of his reaction. Why had he been so defensive? Curiosity gnawed at her as she stared at the suitcase across the room. Chapter 2. The Diary's Dark Secrets. The soft sound of waves lapping against the shore filtered through the open window as Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She turned her head to look at Ryan, who was sleeping peacefully beside her. His face, usually so guarded, was relaxed in the moonlight. She couldn't stop thinking about the diary. It wasn't like Ryan to keep secrets. Or was it? Their whirlwind romance had been so perfect that she had never stopped to ask deeper questions. Now, that nagging curiosity gnawed at her until it became unbearable. Elena slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. The suitcase sat in the corner, partially hidden by a chair. She hesitated, glancing back at Ryan. He stirred slightly but didn't wake. Her fingers trembled as she unzipped the bag and pulled out the diary. The leather cover was soft and warm, the pages yellowed at the edges. She opened it to the first entry, written in Ryan's familiar handwriting. She smiled at me today. That stupid, oblivious smile. I hate her for it. I hate her for how easy her life is, for how she always gets everything she wants. But I'll be patient. This will be worth it. One day she'll know what it feels like to lose. Elena's heart stopped. Her hands shook so hard that the book nearly slipped from her grasp. She stared at the words, her mind racing. She flipped to another page, hoping, praying, that the first entry was some kind of misunderstanding. But the words that followed were worse. Every time I see her with that perfect little family of hers, I remember what mine looked like before everything fell apart. She doesn't even remember, does she? What she did to me, how she ruined everything. But I'll make sure she never forgets. Her stomach churned. What was he talking about? What had she done? For the rest of the night, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, reading entry after entry. The diary was filled with years of anger and resentment, all directed at her. Memories of their childhood were scrawled in bitter detail. The way her parents had fawned over her accomplishments, the way her smile had once made him feel like he wasn't good enough, the way Elena froze, reading one particular passage. It's almost laughable how easy it was. One compliment, one thoughtful gift, and she was hooked. She'll never see it coming. Tears welled in her eyes. Had their entire relationship been a lie? Had Ryan really been planning this for years, carefully manipulating her into thinking he loved her? She clutched the diary to her chest, her mind reeling. This wasn't the Ryan she thought she knew. But then again, how well did she know him at all? When Ryan woke the next morning, Elena was sitting by the window, her face pale and drawn. She had hidden the diary back in his suitcase, but her heart was heavy with the knowledge it contained. "You're up early," Ryan said, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Elena forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep. Too much excitement, I guess." Ryan walked over and kissed her forehead. "Well, I hope you're not too tired. We have a full day planned. Snorkeling, lunch by the water, maybe a sunset cruise." His tone was light, cheerful, but Elena couldn't stop hearing the words from his diary. She'll never see it coming. Throughout the day, Elena's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she had read. Ryan was attentive, sweet, everything she had always dreamed of. But now, every kind gesture felt like a performance, every smile like a mask hiding his true feelings. At lunch, Ryan reached across the table to hold her hand. "You've been quiet today. Everything okay?" Elena hesitated, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Just a little overwhelmed, I think. Everything's happening so fast." His expression softened. "You don't need to worry about anything, Elena. I'll take care of you." The words sent a chill down her spine. Take care of me, she thought. Or control me? That evening, back at the villa, Elena's curiosity got the better of her again. She waited until Ryan was in the shower before retrieving the diary. She flipped through the pages, searching for answers. One entry stood out. "The day is finally here. Tomorrow she becomes my wife. I should feel victorious, but there's a strange ache in my chest. Maybe it's guilt? No, she deserves this. She deserves all of it." Elena's breath caught. Guilt? For what? What exactly was Ryan planning? The sound of the shower turning off startled her. She hastily returned the diary to its hiding spot and sat on the bed, her heart racing. When Ryan came out of the bathroom, he smiled at her. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Elena forced a laugh. "Just tired, I guess." But deep down, she knew she couldn't pretend forever. She had to figure out the truth about Ryan, about their past, about the mysterious incident that had turned his love into hatred. And she had to do it before it was too late. Chapter 3, The Perfect Illusion. The soft turquoise waves shimmered under the afternoon sun, a picture-perfect backdrop for their honeymoon in paradise. Elena stood at the edge of the infinity pool, her toes skimming the water as she watched Ryan lounging nearby with a book. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but his relaxed posture made him look like the perfect husband, a man completely at ease. But Elena knew better now. Her mind was a storm of questions, every thought looping back to the diary. The entries were burned into her memory. She deserves all of it. She'll never see it coming. And the worst of all, I hate her. "Elena," Ryan called, his voice smooth as silk. "Come join me. You've been staring at the water for 15 minutes. She blinked, startled out of her thoughts. Forcing a smile, she turned toward him. "Sorry, just lost in the view." He smiled back, patting the spot beside him. Well, don't keep me waiting. This is our honeymoon, remember? As much as she wanted to run far from him, she walked over and settled down on the sunbed beside him, carefully maintaining her mask. The day passed in a blur of carefully staged moments. Ryan was attentive and affectionate, holding her hand as they strolled along the beach, snapping photos of her laughing over fruity cocktails. But to Elena, every gesture felt rehearsed. She tested him in subtle ways. When he handed her a shell he'd found on the shore, she asked, "Do you remember that time we went to the beach as kids? You got so sunburned you had to stay indoors for 2 days." Ryan's response was instant and smooth. "Of course I do. You kept bringing me popsicles and telling me jokes. It was sweet of you." The memory was real. She remembered doing exactly that. But something in the way he said it felt hollow, like he was reciting a script. That evening, as they sat down for dinner at a candlelit table overlooking the water, Ryan reached across the table to take her hand. "You've been quiet again," he said, his thumb gently brushing her knuckles. "Are you sure everything's okay?" Elena hesitated, her mind racing for an excuse. "I think I'm just a little overwhelmed. Everything's been so perfect. It almost feels too good to be true." Ryan's lips quirked into a half smile. "You deserve this, Elena. You've waited long enough for it." The words were meant to be reassuring, but they only added to the weight pressing on her chest. "You deserve this." What did he mean by that? Later that night, as Ryan slept beside her, Elena quietly slipped out of bed and made her way to the balcony. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, its calm surface belying the storm inside her. Her thoughts wandered back to her sister, Lila. Maybe she should call her, just to hear a familiar voice. But what would she even say? How could she explain what she had discovered without sounding paranoid? Or worse, foolish? She hesitated before pulling out her phone and dialing. Leela answered on the second ring. "Elena, how's the honeymoon? Are you having the time of your life or what?" Elena forced a laugh. "It's amazing," she said, her voice tight. "The resort is beautiful. Ryan's been wonderful." "Wow, listen to you," Lila teased. "You're practically glowing through the phone." Elena's smile faltered. "Lila, do you remember much about Ryan when we were kids?" There was a pause. "Not really. You were the one who was obsessed with him, remember?" "Why?" "No reason," Elena said quickly. I've been thinking about the past a lot lately." "Well, the past doesn't matter," Lila said. "You're living your dream now, Elle. Just enjoy it." Elena thanked her and hung up, but her sister's words left her feeling even more alone. The next day, Elena's unease deepened. As she explored the resort's lush grounds, she noticed Ryan sitting at an outdoor bar with a man she didn't recognize. The man was older, dressed in a sharp suit that seemed out of place among the tourists in flip-flops. Elena ducked behind a column, her heart pounding as she strained to hear their conversation. "Not a good idea to dredge up the past," the man was saying. Ryan's response was too quiet to hear, but the tone of his voice was sharp, almost angry. "You're playing with fire," the man said, shaking his head. "If you think this ends well, you're kidding yourself." Elena stepped back, her pulse racing. Who was this man, and what was Ryan hiding? That evening, as they dressed for dinner, Elena decided to test him again. "I saw you talking to someone at the bar earlier," she said casually. "Who was he?" Ryan glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Just an old friend of my father's. He happened to be staying at the same resort. It was a coincidence." His answer was smooth, too smooth. "Really?" Elena pressed. "What were you talking about?" Ryan's eyes darkened just for a moment. "Nothing important," he said, his voice tight. "Why are you so interested?" Elena forced a laugh, waving a hand dismissively. "No reason. I just thought it was strange, running into someone you know all the way out here." Ryan didn't respond. Instead, he turned back to the mirror, adjusting his tie with precise, deliberate movements. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. As they sat down to dinner, Elena couldn't help but feel like she was walking a tightrope. Ryan was as charming as ever, his smile disarming, his words carefully chosen. But now, she could see the cracks beneath the surface. The perfect illusion was starting to shatter. The days of the honeymoon blurred together, but for Elena, at every moment felt like a performance. She smiled, laughed, and held Ryan's hand, all the while replaying the diary's words in her head. Ryan seemed oblivious to her turmoil, but Elena was certain he was hiding something bigger, something that stretched back, to their shared childhood. She needed answers. That afternoon, Elena found herself wandering the resort grounds alone while Ryan attended a last-minute meeting with the man from the bar. He had brushed it off as business talk, but the sharp edge in his tone had kept her from asking too many questions. Walking along a quiet path lined with palm trees, Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw Lila's name flashing on the screen. "Hey," Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. "Hey yourself," Lila replied. Lila replied, "Why didn't you tell me Dad called?" Elena blinked. "Dad? Why would he call me?" "He said he left you a message before the wedding. Something about Ryan's family?" Elena's stomach tightened. She vaguely remembered seeing a missed call from her father the week before the wedding, but in the chaos of planning, she had ignored it. "What did he say?" "Just that he wanted to talk about something important before you walked down the aisle," Lila said. He sounded weird, kind of anxious. "Why would he care about Ryan's family now?" Elena asked, frowning. "I don't know, Elle," Lila replied. "You know how Dad is. He likes to poke his nose into things, but maybe you should call him." Elena hesitated, the weight of the diary pressing down on her. "Yeah," she said finally. "I'll call him." Back in the villa, while Ryan was still out, Elena sat on the edge of the bed with her phone clutched in her hand. She dialed her father's number, her heart pounding with every ring. "Elena!" Her father's familiar voice boomed through the line. "Finally! I've been trying to reach you." "Sorry, Dad," Elena said quickly. "The wedding and honeymoon have been hectic. What's going on?" Her father sighed. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but now that you're married, I feel like you need to know. Ryan's family, they've been through a lot, and some of it might have been because of us." Elena's throat tightened. "What do you mean, because of us?" There was a long pause. "It was years ago," her father began. "Back when you were in middle school. Ryan's father, John Davenport, worked with me at the firm. He was brilliant, but he got involved in something messy, embezzlement, fraud, I'm not sure. I didn't want to get dragged into it, so I reported him." Elena felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. "You turned him in?" "I had no choice," her father said defensively. "I had a family to protect. But the fallout was bad, Elena. John lost everything. His job, his reputation. His wife left him. Ryan was just a kid, and well, I heard he didn't take it well." Elena's mind reeled. She remembered Ryan's father vaguely. He had been tall, charismatic, always quick with a joke, but one day he had simply vanished from their lives. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I didn't think it mattered," her father said. "I never imagined you'd end up marrying his son." Elena clenched her jaw. "It matters, Dad. It matters a lot." When Ryan returned to the villa that evening, Elena couldn't look at him the same way. Her father's revelation had cast a new light on everything. The diary, Ryan's bitterness, his cryptic comments about her family. "Elena?" Ryan's voice broke through her thoughts. She looked up to see him watching her, his brows furrowed in concern. "You've been quiet all day," he said. "Is something wrong?" Elena hesitated, debating whether to confront him. But something told her that now wasn't the time. "I'm just tired," she said finally. "The sun wore me out." Ryan's expression softened. "Why don't you rest? I'll order dinner in." He kissed her forehead and disappeared into the next room. Elena sat frozen, her father's words echoing in her mind. "I had no choice." But the question gnawed at her. Had Ryan married her because he loved her, or because he wanted revenge for what her family had done to his? That night, Elena waited until Ryan was asleep before retrieving the diary once more. This time, she flipped through the pages with a clearer perspective, searching for any mention of her father. Finally, she found it. "I'll never forget the day my world fell apart. My dad was my hero, and her family destroyed him. She probably doesn't even remember. But I do. Every time I see her perfect little life, I remember. One day, she'll know what it's like to lose everything." The words were a knife to her chest. Ryan's hatred wasn't just about her. It was about her family, her father. Tears streamed down her face as she closed the diary. She felt trapped, caught between the man she loved and the darkness of his past. As she stared out at the moonlit ocean, one thought consumed her. She needed to know the full truth, and the only way to get it was to confront Ryan, no matter the cost.